Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Gemma and today I'm doing my October wrap up. So yes, I'm aware this is a little bit late. Life is very busy at the moment. On top of the fact that this is one of the busiest times of year work-wise, it is also Sam's birthday and my husband's birthday in November, and then my birthday, my mum's birthday, my goddaughter's birthday, my father-in-law's birthday, my best friend's birthday, and my best friend's daughter's birthday in December. So it's just all a bit manic. So yes, tangent. But yeah, that's why I'm a bit behind on getting this up. Apologies, but I'm here today filming. I'm not sure when I'm going to get this edited and up, so it might be even later than anticipated. Apologies. But getting back to the point of this video. In October I read 12 books, which I was pretty chuffed with, and actually I think it might have been one of the best reading months I've had all year with regards to enjoyment and or quality. So I had five 5-star reads, which is incredible, and then 2 4-star reads, 4 3-star reads, and a 1-star read, which doesn't happen on this channel very often. I usually DNF before I get to that, but it was a book that's on my big 100 book scratch list, and so OCD would not let me DNF that book because then I wouldn't be able to scratch it off the doobry. Format wise, I read 5 physical books, 4 audio and 3 ebooks, and from a genre perspective I had 6 that you would classify as literary, 3 LGBTQ, 2 for classics, contemporary and historical. I'll put the whole doobry up here so you can see like all the whole mix. But yeah, and also if you ever want to follow me on Storygraph so you can see what I'm reading as I'm reading it, then that is always linked below. So I'm going to do things slightly different this month, and I'm going to wrap up from worst to best. I don't usually do that. I usually do it in reading order just because that's easier for me, but I thought I'd try something a little different this month. So we're going to start with the 1-star. So that book was A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawkins. Okay, so this is a non-fiction book, and it looks at, as the title suggests, the theory of time from sort of a physics perspective. Wow, this book was dry. It was super dry. I'm not sure who the target audience was for this, because I expect if you are a postgraduate in physics, this would be too dumb for you. If you dropped physics at A-level, then this is definitely too advanced for you. So I think possibly if you were an undergraduate, this would appeal in physics. But for me, it was just way above my pay grade. Couldn't keep up with really any of what was being talked about, and so 1 star, because I feel like obviously it's on my scratch. So this is the one that's on my 100 books you should read scratch list, and I feel like all the books that are on that list should at least be accessible to like a standard level of intelligence, and either I am really stupid or this book did not cater for that. So feel free to berate me in the comments if you think that I'm just ridiculously stupid, but yeah, no. So then next up we have Heatwave by Victor Jestin, translated from the French by Sam Taylor. This wasn't a bad book. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. It was just, I mean, it's very short, and at the beginning of this book a young boy witnesses someone trying to hang themselves in a playground. He's on holiday at like a sort of coastal holiday resort, and instead of helping him, he just watches him die. And then we see what happens in the aftermath of that and the following day. So this takes place really over sort of 1 night and 1 day, I think, maybe slightly more than that. But yeah, it was a bit fever dreamy, and it just didn't really work for me. I could take it or leave it, really. It was fine. Nothing really irritated me about the book. It was just very meh. If it had been any longer, I possibly would have DNF'd it. But for the sake of, what is this, like 100 pages, I just read through it and it was fine. Next up, also in the realms of 3-star, we have Simple Passion by Annie Ernaux. So Annie Ernaux literally won a Nobel laureate last year for literature, and so I was really chuffed that this was on my TBR. Anyway, it's super short, like 50 pages, about a woman who is having an affair with a man, and it's just about her feelings going through that time. This is non-fiction, so this is a real event in her life when she was having an affair with a married man. And and I thought the writing was good. I thought Annie Ernaux writes very well in the way that she makes non-fiction feel like fiction, but ultimately it was 50 pages. Something has to be pretty outstanding for me to give it something that short a high rating, so I would try some more Annie Ernaux. This was an interesting taste of her work, but I don't feel like it probably showcased her in all of her glory, should we say. Next up we have La Bastarda by Trifonia, Melibea, Obono, translated by Laurence Schimel, I believe from the Spanish. And I was so excited to get to this book. So this was on Jen the Librarian and Greg at Supposedly Fun's LGBTQ in Translation book club. So it's one of their picks for the last 3 months of the year. It's super short, and it is the first book, I think, ever to be translated from Equatorial Guinea into English, and so I was super excited to get to it. Obviously, from the fact that it was part of this book club, it has some significant LGBTQ themes in, and we follow a young girl as she sort of navigates her sexuality in a sort of coming of age environment in a village in Equatorial Guinea. Again, this book I think is suffering from the same thing that this one did. There just wasn't enough meat to it. I really enjoyed learning a bit about Equatorial Guinean culture, the way the families were structured, and the villages sort of were structured, with sort of this patriarch at the top and then everyone sort of falling down from there. The whole multiple wives thing, the sort of having to do things maybe you don't want to do for the sake of the family clan. I thought all of that was really interesting, but the main character I thought was ultimately forgettable. Her whole story arc I thought was pretty weak, and sort of the main driving force in this book from the beginning was that she wanted to find her father, and I just felt like that was poorly resolved ultimately. So it was fine. I wouldn't say don't read this. I think it was, for this, again, this was about 100 pages. Yeah, I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that it was a bad book, and I will always champion books that are being translated, particularly from lesser promoted countries like Equatorial Guinea, but unfortunately this one didn't quite hit the mark for me. Next up, and we're still in 3-star territory, we have The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot. I don't think this one needs much introduction. This was one of the books I read for Victober, and I did post quite recently an Eliot versus Braddon video where I talk about this book in a lot more detail, still spoiler free but a lot more detail. So if you're interested in this book and why I only gave it 3 stars, you'll get a better sense from that video, so I'll link it below. But ultimately it was too long, it had too much exposition in it, and the plot just was really quite dull until the last 100 or so pages. Well, the first 100-ish pages and the last 100 pages were good, 4-star territory. The rest of the book was really, really dull, sort of 2-star territory. So, yeah, 3 stars. Apologies for the Eliot fans out there, but yeah, it didn't really work for me. I was pretty bored. Next up, and we move to a 4-star book, and we have The Five by Hallie Reubenhold. So this is a non-fiction account of the 5 women who were killed by Jack the Ripper, and very much focusing on their lives. It isn't about the murders at all, or very little about the murders. It is about their lives and how they got to the position in which they were when they were murdered. I read this for Very Literary Carrie's book club, the Black Hearts book club, so we do have a live. I will also link that below where we discuss this book. We do talk about it in quite a lot of detail, so there are sort of spoilers in it if you're less familiar with the events of Jack the Ripper, then perhaps read the book before you watch the live. But this was solid. This was very good non-fiction writing. It was really accessible, really easy to sort of follow. There's some photos in it, and The thing that shone through most about this was the level of research that Hallie Reubenhold did, and you could see how much work she put into it. And one of the things that sometimes annoys me about non-fiction is authors find this stuff out and then just vomit it onto the page, but Hallie Reubenhold does a very good job of sort of filtering it down to what you need to know to piece these stories together. And for some of the women, there was very little known about them, and they had sort of multiple names, and it was very hard to track. So she must have spent so long researching this book, and that really comes through. Would highly recommend. It paints a perfect picture of poverty in Victorian London as well. So yeah, really enjoyed this one, and I'm glad I finally got to it. So thank you very much, Carrie, for asking me to co-host and encouraging me to finally pick this book up. Next on my list is Jane Seymour, The Haunted Queen by Aliosn Weir, which is the third in her 6 Tudor Queens series. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know that me and the lovely Emily at Novell Novels are hosting a read-along of all 6 books in this series, and over September and October, Jane Seymour was the book we were reading. I had issues with Anne Boleyn when I read that previously, but Jane Seymour I think was probably the best of the 3 I've read so far. I really enjoyed it. I do think perhaps some of that is because I know less about Jane Seymour, but I don't know. I think Aliosn Weir was more creative in her artistic decisions with this book. It talks a lot about some of the guilt that Jane Seymour feels when she ascends the throne, and obviously those are things that we cannot know about, her feelings and her thoughts around those. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend. I think I've said this before, but I don't think you need to read these books in order. There is quite a lot of overlap, particularly between the first and second, but these books would all stand perfectly on their own. And of the 3 that I've read, this is the one I would recommend most if you're looking to try a little bit of Tudor fiction. Next up, and we are moving into our 5-star reads, so my 5-star reads. The first of which is Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. So I buddy read this with a fabulous group. I read it with Nikki from Red Dot Reads, Mitzi from Mitzi Reads and Writes, and Marilyn from Marilyn Maya Mendoza. And we had a blast reading this book. And it took me quite by surprise. When I think of Victorian literature, I expect it to be slow. I expect it to take a little bit to get into. Lady Audley's Secret is not like that at all. It hits you full on the face. Chapter 1, we're right in there, making speculations, trying to work out where the author is leading us, because there seems like an obvious solution, but is it the obvious solution? And it was a roller coaster, and it was so much fun, and I absolutely adored it. Were there slight inconsistencies and things in it that you can pick out? Yeah, of course there were, but I loved it so much. It couldn't be less than a 5-star read for me. In this we follow Robert Audley, the nephew of Lord Audley, Lady Audley's husband, as he tries to work out sort of the secrets around Lady Audley and her past. And I don't think you need to know any more than that. Just if you're looking for an excellent, easy access Victorian classic, Braddon is your girl. Next up, we have another translated book. We have Violeta by Isabel Allende, which is translated from the Spanish. Allende is a Chilean author. And apologies, because I listened to this on audio, I forgot to write down the translator, so I'll put it here. This book was amazing. I loved it. If you like historical fiction, if you like sort of multi-generational sagas, epic sweeping narratives, this is the book for you. We follow a young woman, Violeta, from when she was born in 1920 until she dies in 2020. So she was born in one pandemic, the Spanish flu, the Spanish influenza, and she dies in COVID. And a lot happens over that 100 years of her life, and it was so beautifully written. You get so sucked in. Violeta is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a perfect character. She does stupid things, she makes mistakes, but she's ambitious and she is feisty, and I just loved her story. I loved the surrounding characters. There were particularly 2 female characters that were very feminist and sort of marching in the streets of their city and having to deal with all of that. And yeah, I don't think you need to know any more than that to go into it. Obviously it covers various military coups and this bits and pieces, but yeah, I thought it was quite well balanced between her personal life and the sort of social economical situation at the time. And yeah, really enjoyed it, would highly recommend. And it was my first Allende, and I really need to read more of hers. I've got 2 more of hers on my shelf, but yeah, I thought she'd be an author that I enjoyed. I was right, loved it. And then next up we have Heartstopper Volume 4. So I picked up the first Heartstopper book a couple of months ago, and I was hooked. And I've been sort of saving the last one, and I couldn't save it anymore. So in this we follow Nick and Charlie, who are a teenage couple sort of navigating what it means to be gay or to be bisexual within their sort of social circle. And in this we follow some pretty hard stuff that Charlie is going through. Trigger warnings for an eating disorder, but this for me was the best of the 4. I think as we see Nick and Charlie grow, my love for them has grown, and so to see Charlie in some pain in this book, I think it was really well done. It was sensitively done, and I think we see Nick asking questions that you can imagine a lot of teenagers would ask in a similar situation, and I just thought it was magnificent. So I cannot wait for the last instalment in this one to come out next year. Love Nick and Charlie. And in at number 2 we have Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I did do a solo review of this. This was one of the first books I finished this month, so the review for it went out quite a while ago. I'll link that below. I read this one with the lovely Lindy from Lindy Magpie Reads, and this book was so good. If you like creepy, unsettling books, try this. We follow 2 perspectives here of 2 women who are married. One of them is waiting for her wife to come home, and the other is on a sort of submersible doing like marine research, but doesn't come home when she's supposed to. She comes home months later and she is changed, and we sort of see the current timeline and what happened in the submersible sort of in alternating chapters. And just pick it up. Like I said, I've done a review, so if you are interested, then that's spoiler free. You can go and check that out, where I basically gush about it for 5 minutes. So loved it. Such a good book. And then in at first place is Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer. This book packs a punch and a half. In this we follow the life of Leah. She, right at the very beginning of the book, has a meeting with her doctor where she finds out that her cancer has returned and the prognosis is not good. And then we follow her life through from there, and we get various different perspectives from her and from her daughter and her husband and from her body, some of which is the cancer talking. And it took me a hot minute to get into that flow, the flow of her body talking, because it isn't linear, and it doesn't always make sense. But once you sort of let go of this needs to be in a linear fashion, it does sort of tie in with what's going on in her life, and you can sort of see how her life decisions are affecting her body and her body is affecting her life decisions. And it was just, it was utterly heartbreaking, particularly the perspective of her daughter. I found really, really difficult to read, but it was so well constructed, so beautifully set out, with little glimmers of hope and little glimmers of comedy sort of within this very, very sad story. So yeah, I loved it. I cannot believe this didn't get shortlisted for the Booker. Of all the books I've read for the Booker, there were only two that I really loved, this and Nightcrawling. Neither of those made it to the shortlist. So yeah, I'm starting to think the Booker and me just are fated to disagree for the rest of the time. But yeah, this book, yes, read it. And so that was a whistle-stop tour of the 12 books that I read this month. I am going to do the Bookie Bank separately. So if you missed my video last month, this is my way of holding myself accountable and not buying more books than I'm reading. So I will talk about this more in my next video, and I will do all that then. It also gives a separate space for all books that I've hauled in a month, so I can talk about them a little bit more and not feel rushed and like this video is going to go on forever. So let me know what were the best books that you read in October. Apologies again for this going up a bit late, and I will see you all very soon with another one. Bye guys.